And this review, if you haven't read the title, is my review of the book The New York Trilogy, which is actually a compilation of 3 shorter novels, which is The City of Glass, Ghosts, and The Locked Room by Paul Auster. And I was assigned to read this book in my detective fiction class. Yeah, I know, how cool is that? But I don't actually enjoy a lot of the books there. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're too stale. In which case, Paul Auster's New York Trilogy is a perfect remedy for that, because this is the most off-the-wall detective story I have ever read, and genuinely one of the most off-the-wall stories I have yet experienced, regardless of genre. Anyway, getting into it, is, like I said, it is 3 shorter stories, each about 100 pages. I think The City of Glass is actually a little over, The Locked Room's a little over, and Ghosts is around 80, and they are each of progressing quality. The first story is about a writer named Quinn who gets a mysterious phone call from someone who insists that he is the detective, Paul Auster, and needs his help. What's that, you say? Paul Auster? That name sounds familiar. But yes, it's the author's name as well. This gets even more confusing when Quinn decides to impersonate Paul Auster and go and meet this person who calls himself Peter Stillman, to protect them from Peter Stillman, their father, with the same name. But, at the same time, Paul Auster, aka Quinn, needs the help of a real detective, so he goes in search of Paul Auster, only to find out that the Paul Auster he runs into is a writer of detective fiction. Ha ha ha, much impersonating the author. There now being 3 different Paul Austers in the universe: Quinn, Paul Auster the writer, and Paul Auster the detective. This gets even more confusing, and also quite amusing later on in the stories when other characters named Paul Auster pop up. The use of doubling in this novel is absolutely not fascinating necessarily, but also extremely entertaining. And I will say, though these are detective stories, all of the characters are writers, and the messages of these stories are dictated on literary terms. They're all about writing themselves. They can be read as straight detective novels. Some of them may be quite confusing, especially Ghosts, but mainly it is an examination of writing in itself, and such postmodern elements as who is the writer of their lives, whatever. Is the person reading it more responsible for the actions? Are the characters the writers? So on and so on. I won't go into any of it here because it's just too baffling. It really is best to experience it for yourself. But I will say, just starting with the plots themselves, most people like The City of Glass the best, including most critics, whereas I thought they actually progressed rather nicely throughout the book. I thought The City of Glass was definitely a great story, don't get me wrong, but it trailed on perhaps a little too much into the end, and there was a couple points where it became a little too graphic. Not violent, just graphic. You'll know what I mean, if you read it. The second story, Ghosts, is almost more confusing than The City of Glass, in that it doesn't even really bother to use much names at all. The main character, whose name is Blue, who is a detective, is trained by Brown, a detective, and is hired by White to stalk Black in the room across from him with binoculars. And Ghosts tries to bring up a lot of elements as who is looking at who, and who is really investigating themselves. It's kind of like a claustrophobic paranoia. And again, I won't go into too many themes here, but this expands very nicely on City of Glass and the themes. And if you don't understand a lot of City of Glass when going through it, which I know there was parts of it I did not, I found that Ghosts helped clarify this, and much the same way The Locked Room helps clarify a lot of Ghosts and so on, until the very end with The Locked Room, where you finally get that resolution where you look back on the book, and it's not necessarily an oh moment, but it's definitely a moment where things things really click for you mentally. You begin to comprehend the book. I have a feeling this book will be much more rewarding on second reading, and I think I will actually do that sometime in the future. Not now, far too much to read, but definitely during the summer if I get the chance. The characters themselves are not amazingly developed. A lot of them fall prey to hard-boiled stereotypes, but I think that was the point. It was to almost be a mockery of these characters and these plot devices, and in that I think it succeeded. However, still, being short novels, the characters are not amazingly well fleshed out, most of them falling into the same trap of obsessiveness. which is a constant theme throughout the book, and culminating in the locked room, as before. Just quickly on Ghosts, I think Ghosts is actually a very snappy story, outside of it being a scant 78 to 85 pages. I can't remember, it's somewhere in between there. The pacing is extremely fast and furious, leading up to a confrontation in the end which may not be as climactic as one would hoped it would be, but definitely poses some interesting questions ideologically, and really makes you kind of look back on the story, wondering what the hell is going on. Not that I was amazingly confused by it, but there was a lot of parts you look back in retrospect and their meanings change. I think that's generally a good trait for a book to have, outside of being just straight entertaining on the first read-through. Moving on to The Locked Room, I do believe this is the longest story, and rightfully so. It has the most in-depth plot, and it actually reads a lot more straightforward than the other two, which is surprising considering the way this was going was becoming more and more obtuse. I do, however, think this is for the better, because marathoning this book virtually, day after day, the third story was a nice change of pace. Much the same way Paul Auster greatly changed the feel of the story through Ghosts and kept expanding on it, he does the same thing here while still expanding on the same ideas, leading to that aforementioned aha-type moment. The character here the main character in the story is very fascinating, if only because you actually do get quite a bit inside his thoughts and motivations, and while he does fall prey to more obsessiveness, or traps of obsessiveness, it follows a more linear structure, per se. And though there's still those mindfuck elements in there, like I said, Paul Auster does make a return, and as well as a few other characters you may not be suspecting, or they might not be the same characters, but at least with the same name. Generally, it does like to be amusingly coy with that. But The Locked Room, I think, is actually the best written of the three, and while following a linear pattern, still manages to explore the same themes and ideas that were set forth in City of Glass and Ghosts. And I think the conclusion actually has quite a resonant, and not only with the aha moment, but also it just generally leaves you feeling satisfied because of the more linear nature. I think this was one of the problems with City of Glass and Ghosts, less so with Ghosts, but still City of Glass and Ghosts, where you got to the end of the story, and it was interesting, and it compelled you to read on, but at the same time, in and of themselves, if you read them, they may not be quite as rewarding as within the full collection. Overall, this is a great book. The writing style is eminently readable, and is definitely, if you like detective fiction, or if you just like entertaining, intelligent novels, this is definitely worth a pickup. I do want to stop my analysis here because I want to discuss the book itself. I bought the Penguin edition here, and the Penguin edition is definitely one to pick up if you can. The front of it is got, I'll link to it on the side in the description bar, but quickly describing it, it has all the elements of the book composed on it. It has this kind of cracked old style drawings on it, and an old style of drawings, but it has that kind of cracked feel to it, that almost like when you dip something in or Chinese tea to age it, which I really like that. And the book itself, the front cover, if you look at the front of it and the main character's hand falling down with the pen, obviously dead, you can see that he's also holding the book, which is The Locked Room, which is the exact same picture for this, and he is wearing a blue shirt, and the person standing over him, presumably the killer, is also wearing blue pants, leading you to wonder if this is the same person. So if you look on either the spine of the book or at the back end of the book, you see a artistic rendering of the author, who himself is holding that same type of pen. So you wonder, is this the author? And now it's three of the same person all on the same spine. It's fascinating like that. I love it. And a really playful sense of irony there, along with the eyes constantly going over each other. One last thing, I just wanted to say that before each story there is a full-color splash page introducing it with the picture, or with a nice kind of thin paper cover. I really love this, and this is a beautiful production design. If you're going to pick up the New York Trilogy, which is a fascinating postmodern detective novel, then definitely pick up the Penguin edition, because you really get your bang for your buck. And this just looks fantastic on your bookshelf. There's a lot of books you pick up, and you're like, this isn't too great, but anyway, this is definitely one picking up, both physically and for the story.